When I first started with the Conservancy, it was 15 years ago. Never forget it, we used to come in here, in fact, this very room. We'd come in here, and the way we worked was Noonan would get the mail, and Pat would sit down, we'd all gather around, 4 or 5 of us, and he'd open the mail, he'd say, oh, this letter's for you. This letter's for you. This letter's for you. We'd look, and maybe somebody wanted to give 10 acres, somebody else wanted to give 15 acres, and then we'd run out that day, and we'd try and do that deal. And we'd come back the next morning, Pat would get the mail, we'd all sit around, he'd say, how'd you do yesterday? We'd say, well, this lady's going to give 15 acres here, and somebody else is going to give that there, and he'd open the day's mail, and that's the way we worked. That was the Nature Conservancy. That was conservation back 1971, 72. I actually thought, and I think most of the other people, that we were doing something. We actually would go home, and wife would say, what'd you do? Oh, I saved 15 acres today. You know, it's completely oblivious to the fact that the whole Northeast was being overrun. Industrial development just ripping up the whole, that part of the country. The Southeast was being converted from bottomland hardwoods into agricultural land. The Sun Belt, retirement communities going up, places like Coachella Valley getting completely overrun. In the Midwest, these building water issues that end in the West, these huge issues that are coming out oblivious to all of them. They weren't oblivious to Pat, and when he became president in the mid-1970s, he saw these issues, but how was he going to take this little organization and ratchet it up to that next step? Fortunately, the Richard King Mellon Foundation came along, and that was like putting gas in a super sports car. I mean, that was a match that was made in heaven. And that match has been probably the best thing, well, definitely the best thing that's happened to the Nature Conservancy, and probably about the best thing that's ever happened to conservation. They were continually, the Mellon trustees and Pat, continually challenging each other. They started off with Currituck. Pat says, here's a project that's so complex, we've looked at it, we know its significance, it's a key link in the Eastern Flyway. We can't do it. They said, yeah, you can do it. Here's $4 million. Put that money in there. And Pat said, gee, that's great. And they said, but you can't leave the money there. You've got to roll it over. You need a permanent capital base. Any funds we give you have to go into permanent capital. The idea of the Land Preservation Fund.
Yeah, they have insisted that their money not just end up in dirt, that their money save dirt, that we in turn find a way to get that money back out of a project and use it again and again and again. That is really a Mellon idea. And we've had more leverage from that than any other idea that I can think of within the Conservancy.
We get through Currituck. Now the organization is starting to roll. We're getting some confidence. They come in, they say, all right, give us a section of the country. So we start with the rivers of the Deep South. It's supposed to be all federal money. Well, the federal money's gone the first day we do it. We say, we're stalling the water. They say, no, you're not. Put out the money interest-free and get the states involved. Let's see if we can work with state government.
Where the Rivers of the Deep South started was really at a low point of land conservation in the United States. All of a sudden, all federal funding that we were counting on, particularly in the Apalachicola River, was pulled out totally. There's going to be zero federal funds. Simultaneously, with the Rivers of the Deep South funding by the Mellons, coordinated with the state of Florida under their Save Our Rivers bill, all of a sudden we began to think that we could put together a much bigger package than we'd ever contemplated under the partnership with the federal government. All of a sudden we were talking about 76,000 acres at one shot on the Apalachicola River as versus the entire federal project of 35,000 acres. Pretty soon the picture became so big, everybody wanted to be a part of it.
Next thing you know, we're in there. Now we've got literally $1 billion that we can work with the state of Florida on that. We've got a guy like Dick Lunning down there doing these deals like the Big Bend. We get through the rivers of the Deep South. They say, okay, now let's really put the pedal to the floor. What are you going to do nationally? What's the most critical thing nationally? Well, you look at wetlands. They say, all right, start a national wetlands program. Here's $25 million. Match it 2 to 1. Get into an area like the Coachella.
In my opinion, the most beneficial project we've ever done in the West was the Coachella Valley project. Not only did it preserve an exceedingly important and increasingly rare watershed in the desert and an endangered species, the fringe-toed lizard. But it gave us the first opportunity to do a joint project with 2 federal agencies, a state agency, 9 cities, a county, a private organization, Nature Conservancy, collectively towards creation of a problem that originally seemed irreconcilable. At the end of that project, when the various parties who at the very beginning had been at absolute loggerheads with one another looked back and saw what they had accomplished, they unanimously agreed that it was the most successful venture any of them had participated in, and it gave us a springboard to do future projects. One of the Mellon trustees said to me when we were walking around the Coachella Valley Preserve, said, "We wanted to give you the courage to fail." And that really left an impression on me. We had then the ability to know we could take on something that might fail. And before that, frankly, we were frightened to fail. And now we're not. And because we're not, we're most likely to succeed.
When we started on the Platte River, we thought it was a fairly simple matter, that we could go out and buy some land and protect some habitat as the Conservancy normally does, and that would be the end of it. Well, on Mormon Island, we quickly found out that things weren't quite that simple. The Platte River water is used 40 times before it is actually used by the cranes. What it means is we got to deal with the people who use the water. We need to deal with the agricultural interests. We need to deal with the urban interests, the municipal and industrial uses, to make sure that we are working cooperatively with the people who want to see the water getting down to where the birds are. If we want to protect a migratory species, you got to look at the whole system. You got to look at the whole life cycle of the bird. Historically, whenever someone looked at the Central Flyway, the major focus was up in the Dakotas here, up in the Pothole region, and especially up in Canada. Most of the resources went up there, and that's where most of the attention was. Everybody thought it was the breeding grounds. While they're important, what we found is that we really need to look at other parts of the Flyway. It's these migratory areas, particularly the Platte River and Nebraska, that are important. These stopover areas, these breeding areas, are critical to the whole system. You can protect all these nesting areas, but if you don't work on the rest of it, the system isn't going to work. We began partnerships in Nebraska with the Platte River Trust. We began partnerships with the state of Texas. We began partnerships in the Dakotas with organizations like Ducks Unlimited. We started working with the state of Minnesota through the Reinvest in Minnesota program, where the state put up $2 million for acquisitions of key areas. We finally looked at a whole system, and that excited people. It excited other organizations, and it brought us in partnership with states and private organizations that we've never worked with before. And it opened the door to doing a lot more in the future along these lines.
Where we had first started all this at Mishomic and in the Hamptons and at Orient Point, at Montauk Point, land prices were absolutely out of control. The real estate market in Northeast United States had just turned around from being the most depressed market to all of a sudden being the hottest market. Real estate prices started going up over 25% a year. We were faced with extraordinary prices, a little bit of land left, and trying to decide what, if anything, we were going to be able to do about it. But we sort of figured out finally, no matter how much money we got from the Mellon trustees, we weren't going to be able to buy $100 million or $200 million worth of real estate out there. We had to figure a way to leverage that money. And what we came up upon was getting the local communities and the state government to really help us make an impact. Block Island off of Rhode Island, we were able to save a major portion of one of the most important coastal islands left in the United States. One whole quarter of that island has essentially come under protection by the work of the Nature Conservancy using the National Wetlands Campaign money. The people on the town, again, people that live out there, not wealthy people, the regular year-round residents, the people on that island, voted bond issue after bond issue of their own money to match the Nature Conservancy's money and the wetlands money to save that quarter of that island. They then went to the legislature and asked if they could tax themselves on their own real estate transactions to protect even more land. And they managed to talk the legislature of the state of Rhode Island into doing that. We've managed to roll these properties over and to get the other private money and public money into them in an average of a year to a year and a half, so that over this 5-year period, the money has been used between 3 and 4 times to protect these various properties. And I haven't kept track of the exact numbers, but we've raised at least another $25 million of private donations in the Northeast, particularly on these glacial wetland areas, to match and help roll over the wetlands money, the Mellon wetlands money. So not only have we brought public money in, we've brought a substantial amount of private money, which is continuing to come in and will continue to come in.
Sitting where I am right now, where the planning is going on at an intense level, I see 3 major preserves that we're deeply involved in this year. Each of them will tie in more than 1 million acres. Currituck, Albemarle, Pamlico Sounds, tying in the old Currituck Outer Banks project, Alligator River, going all the way up the Roanoke River, the #1 project on the migratory bird list today. In total, you're going to have over 1 million acres. Okefenokee, Osceola Forest, tying them together, moving down to the Atlantic Ocean on the St. Mary's, down to the Gulf of Mexico on the Swanee River, recreating major wilderness habitat in the eastern United States. We're going to reintroduce the red wolf. We're going to reintroduce the Florida panther. These are areas where we're going to bring back the predators to the eastern United States. From a philosophical perspective, it's quite extraordinary where man has reached the level of sophistication where he's going to bring the predators back in to be part of their environment.
Now the challenge is how to take this forest state area in which there's tremendous public support and expand it to the other areas that need to be protected, particularly as you move south into the Pocono Mountains, where there are tremendous wetlands, over 100,000 acres of important wetlands in the Poconos that we'd like to try and do something to protect. The pine lands in New Jersey, the tidal rivers flowing into the Chesapeake Bay, the Delaware Bay lands. These are areas where there is not yet the major public support, where we think we can do the same thing over again if we have the resources to bring in. We can show that these lands can be bought. Now's the time to do it there, where the prices are not going up yet 25% a year, and who knows what'll come next. And the other direction too, in the inland areas of Maine and coastal areas of Maine, further north than we usually work. This is where we'd like to go next and try and take this same idea and see if we can't make it work there too.
With the solution that we created at the Coachella Valley, we want to do the Carrizo Plains, which is succeedingly complicated and something we'd never have contemplated doing. I remember when I started with the Nature Conservancy 10 years ago, I wanted to do something in the Carrizo Plains, so that far outstrips our ability. And now, with Coachella under our belt, we know we can succeed with the Carrizo. We know we can succeed in the same fashion with the Sacramento Valley project, with the Casumnes River assemblage.
In our business, we can't stand still. I mean, for us to say, oh, we did a good job, we had a year, last year was better than the year before, and next year is going to be better than this year, it doesn't do us any good if we're losing in the overall race. If our world is continually getting worse, even though we're getting better, we have to make these giant steps. We have to move to entirely new levels that, as 15 years ago, were totally unforeseen.
There's a tremendous momentum in the Northeast. People that want to see land protected. And there's public support. Every bond issue that's gone to a public referendum, we have won in the last 5 years. Every legislative battle, essentially, we have won.
We have the vision. We are willing to go ahead and say, this is what we want to do, without fear that people are going to laugh at us. We said, we've already done it. This is what the people want. This is, in fact, what the people want, and the politicians are beginning to wake up to that fact. This is as popular as any platform they can run on.
It takes vision above and beyond the vision we've had, visions of people like the Richard King Mellon trustees, to push you that way. And they did push us that way. And now with a guy like Frank Bourne, who has that same type of vision, who has a bigger picture, he comes in and we can have a guy come in and say, if we want to do $1 million deal or a 1 million acre deal, it's nothing to him. He's going to say to him, well, why can't we do 2 million? And that's the type of challenge you need. That is the Mellon legacy. That's what they've given the Conservancy. Always to push for that next step. Always to move yourself up one more. Never be satisfied with the level you've attained. Get it up to the next one. And when you get there, don't stop and look back and pat yourself on the back. Move to the next one. Where is it? Where are we going? This is the secret of conservation. This is the secret of the Conservancy. This is the fact that will get us to a point where our natural world, natural systems, the stuff that Dr. Jenkins has identified as significant, will in fact be recognized by society as an integral part of our world and something that should be protected, not by the Nature Conservancy, but by society as a whole. And that's what we're shooting for, and that's what we're going to get to.
I see a challenge, excitement. It's going to take some courage, and it's going to take, I wouldn't call it the institution, I like to call it the army that's been created to do that job. And we're going to attack.